Then let's kick off. So hello and welcome to everyone's out there. Really great to see you all. For those who don't know me, I'm a policy advisor, business consultant, and university lecturer who's been working at the intersection of environmental, social, and economic issues for about 20 years in 30 countries. And what I'll try to do today is distill what I've learned over the years and put that in perspective, what I've been seeing in terms of opportunities from the COVID crisis, and what this can teach us for building back better for a more sustainable future. And if you can, just before we go into things, just think about one positive thing, the first positive thing that comes to mind when it comes to COVID. Just do it intuitively, just put that into the chat, one word, one sentence, and we can get back to that later. Right, so pretty much all we've been talking about in the last few weeks and months is COVID, and clearly it has affected a lot of people in very bad ways. But a lot of people can't wait to get back to normal. But I argue that we clearly do not want to get back to normal because there is a much bigger crisis in the making. We now know that flat curves are good, and this will be really useful knowledge and insights when we're dealing with the climate crisis. So what I look at today is the parallels between COVID and climate change. And then I'll reflect on opportunities and win-wins along the triple bottom line, as it's called, or people, planet, profits. Right, so global warming, climate change is clearly not pretty. On the chart here, you see beautiful stripes. Basically, they show the changes in average temperatures around the globe since 1850. And we clearly see that we're moving from blue to a red zone. And the other graph that's overlaid shows us the business as usual trajectory. So if we continue business as usual, we'll end up with more than 4 degrees of global warming Celsius, that is, compared to pre-industrial levels. And what you also see is that we will have surpassed the Paris climate targets of staying below 2 degrees, or ideally 1.5 degrees, already by 2040. So that's clearly not a pretty picture. One of the effects of climate change is, of course, rising sea levels. And this is what London, or Westminster rather, would look like after 4 degrees of global warming. The story on Wall Street is similar. So the famous bull would actually be underwater. And this is still something for the future, right? So we talked about 2100 and you saw that in the chart before, but actually we're feeling the effects already now. There are heat waves, more pronounced droughts, storms, flooding, landslides, besides sea level rise. And these catastrophic events, as they're called, are very much the direct effect of climate change. Now, COVID, let's get back to COVID, and climate change share a lot of similarities, but the response has been drastically different. Looking at deaths, we see 7 million deaths from air pollution alone each year. And so this is a conservative estimate for death from climate change, because it does not capture those people dying in heat waves, through floodings, etc. We've known about climate change since the 1970s, and it's become mainstream knowledge in the 80s and 90s. With COVID, we've seen about 380,000 deaths so far. We've known about it since late 2019. And the risks, though, are actually quite similar. Both present very important risks to health and well-being. They are social, societal risks, economic risks. And climate change in particular is obviously an environmental risk that also affects many other environmental issues, such as biodiversity, for example. They also have in common that they affect everyone. Nobody is safe. But for the poor, it's more difficult to deal with the effects, to mitigate the effect and to adapt. And another commonality is that they both, if you will, show only with a bit of a delay. So with COVID, we know about the incubation period. We also know that there are a lot of asymptomatic cases, and that of course makes it a bit more difficult to handle the two diseases, if you will. Both clearly require a global solution. Neither of these can be solved by one community, one business, one government on its own. And both come with very high costs. In the case of COVID, the high cost actually comes as part of the response. But with climate change, what we know is that investments to keep below the 2 degrees would actually pay for themselves if health costs are considered. So they're clearly at the same scale. They're huge issues. Climate change, if you ask me, is actually the much bigger issue. Yet we've seen very sort of bite-sized piecemeal action. There's no sense of urgency. Whereas for COVID, we've seen immediate action, very drastic measures that were sort of, unthinkable just a few months back. Right. So let's look at the opportunities. And again, I mean, I'm very much aware that the COVID crisis has affected many of us, not only in positive ways. That's clear. But let's look at the opportunities. And what you see here is a beautiful roadside verges that would otherwise be trimmed, but during the lockdown they've been left uncut. And that was a godsend for bees and other insects, who actually found it much easier than to pollinate flowers, to basically do their job, which we know is very important for us humans as well. And who knew bees were also dying much less in car accidents. Apparently several million bees die each year in road accidents too. Well, appreciation of nature. I think this is a really big thing. And personally, I've always loved nature. I've always loved my walks in the forest and in the parks. It, lifts my spirits, calms my mind, helps me clear my thoughts. So it's just really good for my general health and well-being. And I do believe that a lot more people have started to appreciate this during the lockdown, precisely because it was precious. I know that not everybody has been able to venture outside due to the lockdown regulations. But those who have were very much positively affected by it. And research shows how good green space is for both mental health as well as physical health. And of course, the same goes for blue space. So ponds, rivers, lakes, etc. Nature in general. Clean air has been another amazing side effect of COVID. We've all appreciated the lack of air pollution. This is Delhi in India, a city that's notorious for its bad air. And Delhi actually saw blue skies for the first time in years. Note also the absence of planes. Noise pollution is another thing that has been drastically reduced. Not that many people talk about it, but personally, I've really appreciated it. And now that planes start flying again, I actually really notice the difference. This is a picture of the UK, basically just confirming to what extent nitrogen dioxide levels have gone down. So dangerous air pollutants have gone down. In many cities and places, this was -30 to -40%. And we've seen a clear lagoon in Venice, a city, our town, famous for problems of over-tourism for the first time in years or even decades, potentially. And we've seen wildlife reclaiming cities. This is mountain goats venturing into town in Wales. So these were some of the effects, opportunities, the positive side effects on the environmental nature side. Let's look at the social, societal aspect. For me, one of the big messages here is that this has not been at all about social distancing. Physical distancing, yes, very much. But if anything, we've been growing closer together as communities, as nations, and even as a global community. I love this picture. It's from the Clap for Carers campaign in the UK. And one of the things I think we've really started to appreciate is how other people help. I witnessed someone in the supermarket buying chocolate for the cashier, basically just to say thank you. And we've seen these kind of waves of appreciation and showing appreciation across the world. And people now really appreciate what matters to them. Yeah, it's health, family, friendships, etc. Across the world, we've heard stories and seen, personally witnessed, people making music on their balconies, singing together from their balconies to keep each other motivated during the lockdown. And and those health workers and others have been giving back, saying thank you here in this case for the music they've received, the free meals that businesses and restaurants have been providing for them, and just generally giving this appreciation back. Yeah, so lived solidarity. Now let's move to the business side. Digitalization clearly has been the big thing. The world of work, I would argue, is never gonna go back to where it was before the crisis. Working from home is just one thing that a lot of us are potentially struggling with. It's not all perfect, but it's an amazing opportunity in terms of a better work-life balance. Companies have actually been very surprised to see that productivity has increased, where leadership has been sort of facilitating that. And of course, that also has helped us to reduce commuting-related carbon emissions or greenhouse gases, and also has drastically reduced the need for large energy-intensive office buildings. And what I like about this is that even those companies or individuals that were resistant to going online, to who didn't really fully embrace digitalization before, basically had to do it. And I've seen small local shops go online within days and actually, sort of leapfrogging in a way into this new age and increasing their turnover even during the crisis. And I think that's been important, to keep those smaller businesses alive, but also in a way they've started to compete with giants like Amazon. And of course, this is really important for vibrant communities. Another thing I find really interesting is the fact that companies have started to produce stuff that people actually need. So here in this picture, you see a distillery company that's been producing hand sanitizer. On the other side, you see hand gel provided by Louis Vuitton, otherwise known for expensive handbags and perfume, sort of on the luxury side. And agile, more broadly, I think, has been the key word here. Fashion makers have switched to making masks. Companies that were producing lawnmowers before, are turned to making ventilators or respirators. New partnerships have been formed. And I mean, in China, we've heard of, a 1,000-bed hospital being built in just 10 days. Yeah, so really a lot of progress there. But there's also been sort of frugal innovation, if you will. This is an image of the French TGV, which was used to transport patients from places that were where hospitals were overcrowded to other places in the country or even other places in Europe. Again, a sign of lived solidarity. But in other countries like India, for example, trains basically just started to replace hospitals. Yeah, hospitals were overcrowded, and so full wards were put up inside these trains. Right. So I think if the COVID crisis has shown us one thing, it's that drastic action really is possible. And I've put this into a very complex mathematical equation. Basically, if you take COVID-19, you add climate change, on which we haven't seen much action. You add the opportunities that I just mentioned, you get a pretty amazing result, namely this great opportunity to build back better, to basically come out of the crisis more sustainable. And we've seen a lot of positive action there already. So, for example, in France, the government tied its massive bailout programs to environmental conditions. France received a lot of money on the condition that it would cut emissions quite drastically. And one of the methods, so to speak, they put in place was to basically eliminate ultra short haul flights where they can be replaced by trains. The European Union obviously has been a leader too. It has put together a massive green recovery package as a stimulus to the economy. And it's very much focused on renewable energy, on building energy efficiency, and also on electrification of transport. And it's not just been the governments, it's also been the market. The market has basically made it very difficult for fossil fuels while actually providing growth to renewable energy. And cities across Europe and other continents have jumped on this and have used this crisis to make transport more sustainable. And so this is London, but in many other places, they've been devoting car lanes entirely to bicycle traffic. In some places, people have been given money to buy bicycles or to repair them. So a lot of really good initiatives already. So to come to an end, I think it's that the main message here, it's not growth versus green. We can actually have our cake and eat it. But we must keep in mind that like COVID, climate change is affecting us right here, right now. And we can actually create win-wins. Yeah, so the post-COVID recovery can help us address climate change as well as other societal issues at the same time. So, for example, creating jobs in the renewable sector, renewable energy sector, helps across the three dimensions of the triple bottom line: people, planet, profit. Yeah, so let's seize the moment and not waste this crisis. I encourage you to treat it as an opportunity and to look for concrete ways to act now.